Hi everyone. I felt compelled to come on today and record this video in light of what's happened at the Oscars last night. So between Will Smith and Chris Rock. And if you've seen my video on 2022 being a choice point year, well, you have just seen a choice point put right in front of you. So you may recall from the video that I did about this being a choice point year. How did it come to this? How has this happened? The veil lifts and we have a choice. And I think if Will Smith had waited, he would have had more of a choice. But we'll get into that. So I wanted to do this video because this experience, and if you don't know, Will Smith punched Chris Rock at the Oscars for making a joke about his wife, and he was very angry. And so it's been all on the news, and I've seen all the social media commentary, and that's why I decided to come on, because this is a really, really important example, not only of a choice point, but more importantly, about something that the university has been trying to teach us since 2020, and we're not doing a very good job of it. So what I thought I would do is I would go through this to use it as an example to explain what the universe has been trying to teach us. So since 2020, the universe has been trying to teach us through our experiences to be able to see and to be able to see, because this is a higher consciousness way of looking at things. It's been trying to teach us how to look at the world without judgment, and instead to hold a number of truths, often conflicting truths, to be true, and to just hold that without having to judge it. The pandemic was a very good experience for this, and just as a general opinion on this, I think we failed miserably. The pandemic was a good example. We were asked to hold many often conflicting truths at the same time and to not fall into judgment, and I don't think we did a very good job of that. So this is another example that you can use this example to practice with, because this is a very, very rich example to practice with. So, I mean, there's many, but this is it's so public. We might as well use it as a teaching example. So I should just say as well, I've got so many things to say on this subject that I have written some notes. So I will look down, because I'm sure that I'll finish this video and I'll kick myself because I forgot to add loads of extra things in. I mean, there's so much to say on this subject. So let's just begin. So Chris Rock makes a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's hair loss, and so she's got a short haircut. And he made a joke about G.I. Jane, of which Will Smith walked up onto the stage, punched him, went and sat back down, later goes on to win the Best Leading Male Oscar. So that's what happened. So the first thing to look at is that that joke by Chris Rock was really low. So we can hold this to be true as the first starting truth that we need to hold. It's quite a low blow, if these Oscar shows, they employ comedians, and there's a little bit of a roast of some people in the audience. They're considered to be privileged. They're considered, they're millionaires. They're privileged. Let's have a little bit of a pop at them for a joke, and that's kind of what the format has been for a long time. And, you kind of think, well, for 1 or 2 minutes, I'll get roasted. Ha, ha, ha. The cameras are on me. I'll take it on the chin. And that'll be the end of that. And usually it's about, sometimes it's very personal. It is sometimes about marriage breakups or relationships or terrible films someone has done. And everyone laughs, ho, 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 that was really close to the bone. But this one was about someone's illness. So Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia. It's a condition where your hair falls out. Often it's stress related, but there are maybe other reasons. She's been open about it. She has done videos on it. And I think potentially in a very, very aesthetic, beauty-based industry, she may have no other choice but to do that. Maybe she feels. So really Chris Rock's joke, and he did sort of preface it to say, oh, I love you. But it was a joke about someone's physical illness, physical condition. If she had lost her hair from cancer treatment, it would be a very different story. Nobody would laugh at that, right? So you think, oh, because your hair falling out is cosmetic, it's okay, it's fair game. But I don't think so. I think it was actually quite a low joke. It was quite a low consciousness joke. It didn't need to be said. If you want to have a go at somebody for a terrible film or how much money they make or poor life choice, okay. But joking about someone's condition, and if it's stress related, alopecia, often there is a shock or there is something that upsets someone deeply, then that's a mental health issue as well. So to joke about that on a global stage, I don't think is the greatest thing to do. So I think there's a truth in there too, that it wasn't great. So honestly, I've got so many notes on this. So these kind of roasts, we kind of got used to a little bit of joking at the beginning. And I think part of that is that because these people are seen as being so privileged, and I think Ricky Gervais probably started it off as well. Like Ricky Gervais genuinely says, these people are so privileged and they, pat each other on the back and they get awards and stuff. Why can't we take the mickey out of them? And there's a truth in that too, right? So I think that, it's kind of expected that you might get roasted when you go, right? So, and they're privileged and they got loads of money, and so you think, it's their fair game. But despite the fact that Jada Pinkett Smith kind of puts his brave face on it, and she's done some videos on it, and you can obviously see if you look at anything to do with Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith, they're really trying to be of higher consciousness. They're really trying to be quite open to to do healing work, to do the inner work as well. So but we don't really know what goes on and what stress there was before going to this globally televised event where beauty is everything and you always have to look a certain way, and she's gone and she's lost her hair, and maybe there was an emotional stuff before running up to that event that we ourselves don't know about that could have created some tension. Who knows? We don't know what goes on behind sort of closed doors. So we don't really know. But when that joke was made, I think a lot of people could kind of pick up on the fact that kind of you do what you have to normally do, go ha ha ha, let's just shake it off. But then something must have happened. There's some sort of thing whereby maybe he looked at his wife and she looked a bit unhappy, and something sort of clicked with him that he needed to do something about that. Now, I think if he had stayed in his seat, because this was his choice point, if he had just stayed in his seat, the things would have become clearer for him, the veil would have lifted, he would have had a choice, and he may have chosen very differently. But he didn't. And I'll come to that in a second. He didn't do that. He got up out of his seat. He had a bit of time between, getting up out of his seat, walking across the stage, punching Chris Rock, and then going back to his seat, and he was still quite angry at that point. You could see that choice wasn't there. It wasn't available to him in that moment. The emotion was too high. So everyone's quite shocked. There was violence. It was live. Nobody saw it coming. Will Smith doesn't have that persona of going around punching people in the face on live TV. He does. And so everyone was quite shocked. But I think this is what is also really important, is that I think that society has quite unfairly, and I think society's kind of got this from religion, and I think it's kind of got it from Christianity, is the idea that our idols must be perfect. They must be pure and they must be perfect. And so we have this idea that money sanitizes everything. Money solves all problems. If you've got money, you don't have any problems anymore. You're perfectly happy. There's nothing that would bother you because you're a millionaire, which is a lie, right? There's this idea that, well, if you've got money, then everything must be great and you must have resolved everything and you have self-control and you have this and you have that, and you can't be angry because you've got money, you've got success. How can you be angry? How can you be ungrateful? How can you be not feeling worthy? So we have this idolatry in society that says, if you've got what I want, if you've got what I don't have, you should have everything in your life sorted by now. So when somebody who others may look up to and say, you've got everything that I don't have, money, success, I don't know, whatever, wealth, you've been in films, you've got a great career, you've got a loving family, whatever, you've got all these things, you should now act the way I expect you to act, because as if this solves everything. And I think it was quite a shock to see that it doesn't. So I think that's part of a societal response to that. And I think as well that not only that, it's this idea that perfection exists in human beings. So if you've got all of this, you must mean you're perfect. And that's obviously a lie. And humans aren't even meant to be perfect. We were created with imperfection so that we could grow into that, right? We're transcending, we're growing, we're evolving. And so this idea that our idols must be perfect for us to be happy because they're everything we wish we were. There's this strange relationship that goes on whereby we believe someone or something to be perfect. And when we find out that they're less than perfect, we get really upset as a society. Now, I personally like flawed heroes. That's my thing. I liked flawed heroes because I think flawed heroes are at least authentic. They're at least true. They're at least honest. There's an honesty and there's an authenticity to say, I'm not perfect and I'm not trying to be. One of my all-time favourite heroes is Zinedine Zidane. One of the most talented football players that ever lived. And he would sometimes dribble past all these defenders. He'd have a wide open goal. There was no way he could miss it, and he would miss it all the time. And it wasn't because he wasn't skilled. There was something in his mind, I think, that didn't want that success. And he didn't. I've seen videos where it's like the greatest goal that was never scored. that should have been scored. But I quite like that. I don't need my heroes to be perfect. I can accept the fact that they are hugely talented without needing to have all the awards and all the wins and everything else. I just like the way he plays, and I like him as a human being. So I liked flawed heroes, but most of society doesn't really like flawed heroes. They like heroes to be perfect. Right, you kind of go on the hero's journey. You're not perfect at the start. You transform, and then you're perfect, and then everything's lovely. That's the mythology behind being a hero, right? So I think that's what's caused a lot of upset as well. And some of the things that are being said are kind of true as well about his acceptance speech as well. So the other truths that we can hold about this is that violence isn't really acceptable. It's not a way of solving things. These are true. In his acceptance speech, he did say love makes you do crazy things sometimes, and I think that a lot of, especially women, triggered a lot of women. And kind of rightly so in a way, because domestic violence, if you've grown up with violence in the family, Often the man will hit somebody in the family and then said, I did it because I love you. And so for a lot of people with domestic violence in their histories, the line between violence and love gets blurred, and that's what also perpetuates violence along the ancestral line as well. It's just that the violence and love, when they are connected, can cause deep pain for generations to come. So there is a truth in the fact that people have been quite upset that he blamed love for his violent actions. You could take it in another way, and you could say that, you know, there may have been untold other stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about, and he felt there was a history as well there with Chris Rock, and it kind of was the last straw in something. But anyway, that is a truth about the domestic violence. It's not a great message. And what's also not great about it as well is that, you know, male violence, man on man violence is not good either, right? Violence is not the way to solve things, right? So the reason I'm saying all of this is because there was an act of violence, yes. But what's happened is, and you know, I went on social media for only a very small time this morning just to hear what had happened, because I didn't know what had happened. And I could see all these opinions on it. Lots of condemnation, lots of judgment. This is why I wanted to do this video, because the truth is there was an act of violence. It was global because everyone saw it. It was on TV, it was live. But then every individual has given it a different meaning. Some people have condemned it from violence against women. You can't add with love and violence together. Someone else has just said, well, violence is terrible. Someone else says this, someone else says that, right? People have been attaching meaning onto an act, whereas in actuality, the only one who attached meaning originally was Will Smith. He attached meaning to the joke, and he interpreted that meaning. That meaning caused him pain, and then he inflicted pain, right? So, but it's this everyone adding their own personalized, individualized meaning onto the act that is causing quite a lot of distress at the moment. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on. I'm just going to mention this very briefly. And that is everyone jumping on social media in order to condemn what happened, the violence, for any number of reasons. The people doing it feel like by going on public and condemning his behaviour, they have done something of good. And this is a lie. It's an egoic trap. So I want to talk about that later. I'm just going to introduce it now, because just because you've added meaning onto this event, and because it's brought up a fear within you, that violence has brought up a fear, it's triggered a fear within you of what it might mean, what the implications are, what it might do, you have condemned it. And in condemning it, your egoic mind thinks, aha, I have done something to prevent future pain. But it hasn't really, and not at all. And I'm going to talk about this going later on. But I just want to introduce this idea from here, that some of these things are egoic traps. Most of it is an egoic trap. So we just be mindful of this before you start typing things into the World Wide Web, right? So let's think of another truth. Violence is ugly. Yep, that's true. Nobody likes to see violence. Yep, that's true. Does violence make most people uncomfortable? Yep, that's also true. Was it justified or unjustified? You can't answer that, because that's your meaning that you've put onto it, and everyone will have a different opinion on it. It's not a truth, so we can't decide what the truth is in that. But just because something makes us uncomfortable doesn't make it wrong. Sometimes discomfort is a necessary part of the growth process. So this is why I'm going to encourage you to not do too much judging on this subject, is to actually try and keep meaning out of the subject as much as possible. Because the more meaning you attach to it, the more it is to do with your identity and the more pain, suffering it ultimately causes. So, you know, people were quite upset. There's an act of violence live on stage. It's amongst people who, as I just said, you know, they've got money, they've got fame, they've got everything. Why would they resort to violence? Right? Well, violence happens every day. Even if there wasn't a war going on that everyone's focused on, violence happens every day. Violence happens in the home. Violence happens in the community. Violence happens in the pub when people drink too much, especially in the westernized world. You know, violence happens daily. And I don't see you condemning it everywhere you go, right? It's just because it was put in front of your face, right? Maybe you do condemn it, right? But like, you know, violence is part of our society. And if we want to do something about that, it kind of does start with us. It doesn't, it starts with us, and it starts with our own internal peace. And peace is a state of consciousness. It's not just a physical act of violence. But fighting occurs all the time. Violence occurs all the time. And so just because it's made you uncomfortable, because it's shown up in a place where you weren't expecting it, you had an expectation that it would be a violent-free zone. You had an expectation potentially that money doesn't breed violence, right? That once poverty has been sorted out and you have risen above the poverty level, there'd be no violence. That's sort of making assumptions about what money solves and doesn't solve, what success solves or doesn't solve. And most of them aren't true. So what you saw was just uncomfortable for most people. It makes most people uncomfortable. There's somebody who is, you would say, would be likable, is trying to move into more higher consciousness sort of for themselves, goes up and hits somebody. So, you know, by condoning it, not condoning it, by the opposite, by condemning it, you know, it's not that you step away from that violence, but the mind, what happens is the mind says, oh, that person was violent. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't like this feeling. Therefore, I'm going to separate myself from that person, either by condemning them or telling them, I'm not going to follow you anymore. I'm not going to watch your films. You're not like me. I thought I was like you and you were like me. See, identity comes in, egoic identity comes in. I thought you were like me, but you've done something I don't like. Therefore, I'm going to separate myself from you, point the finger at you, and then I can feel all right again. And yet there's violence in our society every single day. There's violence all the time. There's anger. There's a lot of anger in society as well. So we have all of these things already existing. And when one person demonstrates it, that you're not expecting it, it makes us quite uncomfortable. And so that's why we go into like a sort of a blame mode. So I'm going to confess something so that you can see this as well for yourself. And that is that I'm not pointing the finger at Will Smith for being violent. I'm not violent. Maybe if I'd done a film about Muhammad Ali, I'd be better at punching, but I'm not, and I don't fight, and I'm not a violent person. But I have been very angry in my life. I say that now I'm probably 95 to 98%, generally speaking. I'm a very peaceful person, generally speaking. But I do know anger. I know anger very, very well. And I've worked through a lot of my anger. Therefore, I'm now 95 to 98% peaceful. Now, why have I left that gap? I've left that gap because that 2 to 5% is the reason why I understand Will Smith. I've done my shadow work, so that's why I don't point the finger. And that is simply that the things that do cause me great anger still can only be triggered by two people in my family. And the reason there's only two people who can trigger great anger is because it's historical. So family members are notoriously good at pressing our buttons. They're the only people who kind of know where those buttons exist. We've grown up with them, right? They're our parents or our siblings. They know our buttons. They know how to trigger us. And there's a history of hurt that has not been healed. And so they can still trigger you. Most of the people you come in contact with probably will never trigger you. Some will, some won't, but you usually will resolve it quite quickly without having to go into great anger. But I understand it and I understand how Will Smith could be enraged enough to, even with all the cameras on him, I can understand him, where when rage hits you and you have been truly triggered, there's nothing that can kind of stop that process. You get like a split second of choice, and it's so fast that you would say that you didn't feel like you had a choice because it's so fast. When someone just angers you a little bit or frustrates you or annoys you, that's where the spiritual practice of create some space comes in, so that you can have a choice to respond and not react. And, Will Smith getting up on the stage was a reaction. But I understand that because when my family press my buttons, and it happens less and less frequently, but they still can do it, they do it deliberately. They know it's a button, they know it's a trigger, they do it deliberately, they do it for fun. And that enrages me. And once that rage has started, it has to come back down of its own accord. I don't feel in control to stop it. I'm holding my hands up, right? You might be surprised to hear it, but I believe in being transparent and honest, right? So I can kind of see that rage. I can kind of see that once you start on that, sometimes I'll get angry with my mum and she'll be like, "My God, Sharon, like, talk quietly because everyone can hear you." And I'm like, I don't care who hears me. And I really can't. I can't see anybody else in the room or in the place. I can't see anything. All I can feel is that emotion. And so I don't know exactly why Will Smith got triggered. You can kind of guess and you can kind of sort of postulate as to why. But he obviously got triggered. And he had a split second. That was his choice point. He actually had longer. If he stayed sat, I think he would have had longer. The veil would have lifted. He would have seen, actually no, and he would have had the choice to a higher level of consciousness. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I think if he could do it again, which you can't, but if you could have that moment again, I think he would choose differently. But that's a choice point for you. So I can kind of understand how, if someone triggers you that badly and you've got history with them. So Chris Rock and Will Smith, there's a history of Chris Rock making jokes at Will Smith's and his wife's expense, right? So there's a history there. And it's a button, and it may be a very sore wound, and it got triggered. And this time it wasn't about their relationship and stuff. This time it was about, an illness. So it may be even more sensitive this time. So, like I say, I've done my shadow work. I know I have anger in me. I'm not going to blame someone else for being angry. I also know that with shadow work, what happens is that you have anger within you. You don't like this about yourself. You've judged yourself for having that anger. So then you project it out onto someone else and you say, "Oh, you've got anger. It's not me." Judgment creates the separation. It's you, not me. We're not the same. I can judge you and then I can go about happily around my business, right? So I've done the shadow work, so I'm happy to say I'm angry. I get angry. I get enraged, and that's fine. That doesn't mean I can't transcend it. It doesn't mean I don't work to transcend it, but that's what shadow work is all about. It's just the acknowledgement of its existence so that we can be more loving and more unconditionally loving to others and ourselves. So, part of that, doing that shadow work stuff, is so that we can be more loving to ourselves and therefore we can be more compassionate to others. So most people haven't done the shadow work, right? So what's happening and what you can see in social media is that people are projecting. They're projecting their fears, they're projecting their own anxieties, they're projecting some of their identity-based belief systems on people. And so, people aren't comfortable with violence. So they think that by condemning someone, by saying that's bad, I'm not going to follow you, you're not the person I thought you were, they think they're doing something in the world. That's what the ego thinks. I am doing something in the world. I'm doing some good. And this is an egoic trap. That's not true. Again, I'll come to that in a minute. So, who got hurt in this? Well, Chris Rock got a bit hurt. He got punched. He took it quite well, actually, I thought. Maybe he was looking to see if security would take Will Smith out, because I think he was quite shocked. He didn't know how to respond. He has at least taken the higher ground. He has not pressed charges. The police obviously would love for him to press charges. 2 black men fighting on stage in front of a global audience. Of course they want someone to be arrested. He hasn't fallen into that trap. So well done to Chris Rock. But then you have to ask yourself, who did it really hurt? And I don't think Chris Rock is the answer. Chris got punched and he could have taken it as a humiliation. I don't think he has. I think he's going to come out of it quite well. So I don't think he's, I think if anything, it will help him not do anything towards his career. So who did it really hurt? It hurt Will Smith, right? It may hurt his career. For sure there will be people who want to stop following him as a film star, maybe don't want to see his films, maybe he'll be a bit more less of a sure thing in the future, who knows, right? But it hurt him more because I would say there are so few people of colour winning leading roles that was his moment. He'd kind of come up from music, TV. He ended up, he's a big film star, but they've been blockbusters maybe, but not serious. And it was a story that was changing people's perception of people of colour. It's the Williams family. And they had changed people's perception of people of colour in sport and everything else. And it was really going to be an evening of triumph for black people of colour. It was a great story of success for the Williams family, the dedication, the hard work, everything else. And then Will Smith playing him, and he's one of the only, I think it's 5 people of colour to ever win leading roles. So it should have been a triumph, but what everyone's talking about is the fact that Will Smith punched Chris Rock. So who's really losing here? Well, obviously, I think probably Will Smith is. And I genuinely believe if he had a choice to do it again, I don't think he would have done what he did. And I think he probably will regret it. I think even if he doesn't publicly say it, and he may even publicly say it because him and Jada do this red table talks. He may well talk about it in the future. But he obviously didn't have time to process it on the night. So obviously he was crying. He obviously realised it, but he hasn't processed it fully, right? So Denzel Washington said to him, and he said it in his speech, at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. And I thought that was a very beautiful thing to share. Obviously, I don't believe in the devil. The devil doesn't exist. But self-sabotage definitely does exist. And you assume that once you get to a certain level, and this is an incorrect assumption. You can hear it from famous people all the time, people who are successful all the time. When you get successful, you don't think, well, they're successful, they're really super confident now. But we're so used to having our masks and our personalities and our identities, the ones that we show the world. Well, of course, we're not going to show the vulnerability in that. So the mask is there as a form of protection. And so we assume that everyone acts confidently, therefore they are confident. But confidence is of the mind. Self-worth is what you really feel on the inside. It's an essence state. And just because you've been successful, people assume that because you're successful and you're now confident. And it's not really that true. You hear it all the time, how, you know, some of the greatest singers in the world get sick before they throw up before they go on stage. Comedians the same. Actors kind of the same. They need the validation from other people. It's the kind of industries where you need validation from other people, and so you're always feeling like externally you need it validated rather than having it from within. So there isn't always this strong sense of self-worth. They might be confident, which is a mind state, but self-worth is an essence state. They may not always have that. And so, you know, Will Smith would not be the first person in history to, on about to receive an award for, celebrating his greatness, if you like, to self-sabotage that because he doesn't feel worthy of it. Seriously, he's not the first and he won't be the last. Unfortunately, it's very public, right? So again, we make all these assumptions about what fame and money and success should look like, and we're quite shocked when it doesn't match up to our expectation. So I'm going to carry on. Oh, I lost a page there. Okay. So, self-sabotage. So, you know, Will Smith hits another man on stage. Everyone's horrified. And I will say this, that's not the worst scenario we could have ever had. And because a black man on stage who's successful, punching someone else, the racists will have a lovely field day on that, because they believe, they have this racist idea of black people being more prone to violence, and they can point their finger and say, hey, look at them, they're fighting, and no one else has ever fought at the Oscars, and look, it's a black man. But it could have been worse. Will Smith could have hit a white comedian. And we live in such a racist society still that it would have been a hell of a lot worse, because that would have created even more problems. So I think what the violence brings up will also bring up a race issue as well. I hope it doesn't, but I suspect it will bring certain people out of the woodwork over it. So I want to address then, like, one of the last few things I want to address is about what the ego says. Okay. So the idea that when you condemn somebody, and you condemn this violence and you condemn that violence, and you say, oh, this is bad and we should not have violence on our screens, or we should not have this. The condemning part is the ego part. The ego part wants to separate, like I've said, separate, project. It's not me, it's you. You're terrible, I'm lovely. Now I can feel comfortable again. So this condemnation, not only does it not do anything in the world of any positive, you think, oh, if I condemn them on Twitter and say this is terrible, then I've done something positive in the world. And I'm going to argue that it's the exact opposite. I'm going to argue that when you condemn somebody for their actions, it doesn't contribute to the betterment of society. It actually does the opposite. And the reason is this, is when someone has done something that you disagree with, and you treat them with love and forgiveness and compassion and understanding, those are high vibrations. Love, peace and joy are the three highest vibrations we have in this world as human beings. They're our highest levels of consciousness. When we offer that to somebody else, we're offering that vibration to them, and then they can, having received that love, compassion and understanding, they can then take that and then look at that through those same eyes of love, compassion and understanding and non-judgment, and that they too then can kind of sort of see their way through from that higher perspective. But when you condemn somebody, when you call them out and you shame them, and let's call it what it is, you're shaming them, when you shame somebody for their actions, what actually happens is shame is the lowest level of consciousness. Lowest, bar none. Shame is the lowest level of consciousness. When you shame somebody, they become the least powerful that they can possibly be. So love, peace and joy, you're at your most powerful. Shame is at your least powerful. Your choices suddenly disappear, right? You're so caught up in this low level vibration of shame, guilt, anger, all of these things, that your view of the world comes from that place. So it's a massive climb from the bottom rung of consciousness back up towards love and forgiveness. So you want them to act in a better way. Well, guess what? You've dropped them further than they were anyway. They were at anger, which is somewhere low, but it's not as low as shame. When you shame them, you're dropping them even further down from a place where they're going to have to climb really high back up to be able to act in a way that you prefer, right? So if you want to change someone's behavior, and I don't think you should try and change someone's behavior, but if you want someone to behave better for their own betterment, for their own highest good, then shaming them, making them feel guilty, punishing them, that is not going to help anything in the world. It makes you feel better because your ego has separated, it's projected, I'm not that, you're terrible, I'm lovely, brilliant, let's move on, right? You feel better, but you're not doing any good in the world. So I can't begin to tell you how much I see it on social media, and it drives me insane. How much judgment there is in this world, and how the people judging thinks that their judgment is helping. Now, I've fallen into this trap in the past. I understand it. I'm not Sarah. Actually, I can say it to myself. I can say it. I'm quite judgy sometimes as well. I try not to be, and this is the thing. This is why it's a practice. The judgment doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anyone. The answer is always more love, as Ram Dass used to say. The answer is always love, and it's always compassion. If you want to see something better in the world, for the betterment and for everyone's own health and happiness, then love is the answer, not shaming people. So I think it's important to bring that to people's attention, because, you know, the egoic mind is so cunning and it kind of just wants to make itself feel better. But in doing so, it acts as a disservice to those who want to actually help in the world and want to make the world a better place and want to encourage more love. And actually, this judgment that we're kind of conned into it as well by social media. In the world of the internet, like, my God, it's so encouraged to share an opinion. It's encouraged to share every thought that comes out of your mind, as if everything your mind produces is a gem. When most of the things that come out of people's minds is pure, terrible, virile spew. And actually, it's better not vocalized. But, you know, the egoic mind says, well, my opinions are valuable. If I say share my opinion, someone might like it. And if someone likes it, that gives me value. And if that gives me value, I feel good about myself. And this vicious cycle. So I say, don't fall into that trap of being convinced that you need to say something to condemn a behavior that you disagree with. If you disagree with it, send love. Don't send condemnation and shame. So, to the original point of this video, and that is, since 2020, the universe has been trying to encourage us and trying to teach us that what exists in the world are many truths. Okay? And we are not to judge the truths. There are many versions of a truth in many ways. So what I mean by that is it true that violence is not good? You can say yes, right? Violence doesn't solve anything. That's the truth, right? Okay, yeah, that's the truth. Will Smith was clearly upset because that joke was quite a low blow. That's probably true as well. He may have been triggered. That's true. There was a lot of pressure, and fame doesn't necessarily remove all of that. There's many truths that we've talked about already, right? And you can hold, and this is the practice. You hold all of them to be true. It's like I always do whenever I say this, I have both hands out, because that's what it feels like. Because people want to do this. They want to go, this is what happened. I think that's right, and I think that behaviour was wrong, and therefore I've made a choice between the two. I'm choosing that behaviour was wrong, therefore I'm a good person, job done. Throw that away and go and complain about something else in life, right? But the practice is to say, actually, all of these things are true. That he's hurt himself more than he's helped. He's probably the biggest victim in all of this. He's a victim of himself. You know, and all of that, right? So can we hold all of that uncomfortably at the same time without the need to judge? That's the practice. So you don't decide, you say, well, this is all the truths. Okay, well, I've got all the truths now. I've got both sides of the argument. Okay, now let me decide which one I am going to identify with. This is the practice. You don't identify with either. You just hold all of them to be true and not judge. Just be love with all of them, because there is a truth in all of them. And what lower consciousness would do was to take sides, duality, take side, polarize, divide. And we're saying we don't want to divide anymore. We want to just accept the fact that we are imperfect human beings and we're doing our best, and that we help and encourage people to choose higher consciousness rather than the lower consciousness that only makes everyone, including the perpetrator, suffer, because the idea that they don't suffer is an untruth. So that's the practice, is the challenge of holding conflicting ideas to all contain some truth in it, and to be okay that there is no right and wrong weighing up process of which one we think we should identify with that makes us a better person. We can just have all of those truths be available to us and say it's a bit of everything. Right? So that's all I really wanted to say, except for, you know, when we do the spiritual work, when we do the inner work, it's inner work, right? It's not about what you write on Twitter. It's not what you what you post on Facebook or TikTok or wherever your choice of social media is. It's not the external. If you think you're doing good from writing a few lines on Twitter, you're fooling yourself, because you're not. So the inner work needs to be done. If you don't like the violence that you saw on TV, if you don't like the war that you can see on TV, that's inner work that needs to be done, because our outer world is part of our inner world, is a reflection of it. So there's no substitute for, you know, this inner work. If you don't like violence on the outside, resolve the violence on the inside. You know, people are like, oh, someone smacks someone on global TV, that's terrible, that's violence. Well, in some people's minds, leaving people of colour out of an award system that's been going for decades, that's an act of violence as well in some people's eyes. It depends on where how are you seeing this violence? Where are you seeing this violence? There's overt violence and there's other violence. Sometimes people are violent with their words, not with their fists. We have to resolve this inner question within ourselves, instead of just looking outside and thinking, I'll condemn that because that makes me feel better. It's much more deeper than that. It's inner work that we need to do. So I don't know if this was all controversial or not. Who knows? Hopefully it wasn't controversial, but maybe it'll be controversial to some people. But I felt really called to do this video because I think it's such a rich teaching experience, from about holding the different ideas to be all okay and be okay with that. But also you can see it's a choice point. It was Will Smith's choice point. It was very in our faces. We all got to see it. Some people's choice points won't be so overt. I've had my choice point. I've made my choice. And I will do a video on this shortly. I may even record it this afternoon. We'll see. but my choice point was much more peaceful than Will Smith is. So I'm sorry for that for him, but I don't get to choose the choice points. So I will do a video and it's going to be an update on my original video because I've had my choice point now, so I can share with you my own experience of it. But yeah, thank you for watching this video.